We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
The Joe Biden administration is proposing changes to regulation on marijuana. What impact will that have across the country? What impact will it have on legality across the country? And, of course, on people who are already in prison for marijuana-related offenses. We're very fortunate to have with us Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott Cosenza, Esquire. Scott, thanks for being here.
Cheers, Mark. Always a pleasure.
So, Scott, what is the Biden administration proposing?
Well, this is one of those, I guess, trial balloon is how you say it, where they don't actually have the proposal and release it or implement it. It's just they've released to friendly media outlets their intention to change the regulation. That's what we have so far as we record this in front of us. Statements that they will move to change the classification. Right now, marijuana, you know, we have a federal system. So there are state laws about marijuana and federal laws about marijuana. And federally, you may not possess marijuana, even though you can go to stores in a majority of states, I think now in the United States, and purchase marijuana or marijuana products. It's a federal felony to have even one joint worth of marijuana. They just don't prosecute it. And that's the system that we've been living in since the Obama administration. When they changed the rules to allow, you know, Obama had gone harder against marijuana than President Bush did. It was kind of remarkable that people thought he would be more tolerant, the federal posture with respect to marijuana prohibition than the previous Republican president. And he wasn't. He was much worse. And then they got pushback. And I think maybe it was before his, I have to check the timing on that. It might have been before his first reelection or his reelection campaign that they did this, but they made a memo that basically said as long as people were obeying state law with respect to marijuana, whether that was using it or selling it, then they weren't going to be charged federally. And that's the system we've been living under ever since. There was talk for, people may recall, Jeff Sessions, Donald Trump's attorney general, was a vehement anti-marijuana crusader and wished to return to full-on prohibition and federal criminal prosecutions for all manner of marijuana crimes. And that was stopped by a Colorado senator, actually, who refused to advance any of Donald Trump's nominees for any office if they continued with that practice. And that sort of put the cat back on the bottle. And marijuana is scheduled federally. It's on what's called Schedule 1, which is actually, I think it's a Food and Drug Administration schedule, which says that it has no medicinal value whatsoever. And so it cannot be prescribed. And then when you combine that with the federal criminal prohibition, you know, basically there's no valid legal reason to ever have it. And the remarkable thing is some drugs that are widely seen as much more abused and deleterious to people's health and society are on a lower schedule. So cocaine, for instance, is not on Schedule 1. There are medicinal uses for cocaine, and it can be medically prescribed, but not marijuana, even though we have a nation where millions of people take marijuana, not just for recreational or non-prescription purposes, but for medical purposes, whether it's CBD stuff or, you know, as a appetite stimulant for those who have wasting diseases and things. It's used medicinally all over all the time, right? But is forbidden from doing so.
So essentially it's a federal law at present without teeth, federal regulation at present without teeth, without enforcement. And so
yes, so it's a federal regulation that the president can change at his will, basically. But you know, they go through a lot of talk.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to say for people who don't know, there's lots of talk about, well, these, you know, we're reviewing the regulations, or, you know, the idea is that this is somehow arrived at by like officialdom or smart people and scientists and things like that. It's not. It's simply a political choice. They can choose to make it Schedule 3 if they want, which would mean it would be widely available via prescription, or keep it at Schedule 1 to make it completely forbidden from possession.
So I just want to get clear. So if Joe Biden and his administration determines that this has to be, well, this will be further deregulated at a federal level, what that means is that the states that currently don't have essential legal pathways for marijuana, they would then obviously not be obligated to do it because you're not forced to do
No,
anything.
it's a feature of
But
our federal system. They wouldn't have to do anything.
okay, so but they could if they wanted to without having to go through some kind of loopholes to comply with federal law in terms of, for example, in terms of banking
No,
and things
they
like
they
this.
don't. They well, okay, so that's the big benefit. But the banking thing would change, for instance. So right now, a lot of these dispensaries are shut out of the banking system. They oftentimes can't take credit cards. They can't have bank accounts. You could make a case too that um, an administration that wanted to frustrate their success could lean on banks that give like mortgages even to the properties that they occupy. Right, all these places don't own their own real estate. Most retail stores rent, and that's true for most of these places. Well, they could go to banks and say, hey, you're a federally chartered bank. You can't have a tenant that is committing federal felonies literally from the moment they open until the moment they close. So the kind of normalizing or normalization of marijuana businesses will be or would be a big feature for, and it wouldn't be total, by the way. It wouldn't be like, okay, now we're completely prohibited and now we're okay, because it won't change the law, Mark. This is just a designation in the Code of Federal Regulations, which gives the executive the power to schedule different compounds. And schedule means place them on. Schedule 1, 2, 3. Those are the kind of main brackets. Maybe there's 4 as well, which I think is over-the-counter OTC medication. So that's where the change will come.
Okay, and will there be any impact on people who are federally incarcerated for drug crimes?
I don't think so, because at the time, there's a very small set of people that are incarcerated on federal marijuana charges. That's a rare bird. And if they broke the federal law at the time they were alleged to have broken the federal law, if you later change the federal law, you don't get a get out of jail free card because the thing that you did is now not a crime. If you did it and it was a crime, unless, Mark, there could be some ruling from a court that it was inappropriate that it was ever a crime, but that's not what we're talking about now. Now we're talking about the regular kind of political order of the Democratic wheels turning, and the ruling is this is no longer going to be, forbidden.
Well, let's talk. You mentioned the word political there. Let's talk about what's the political benefit for Joe Biden here.
Oh, yes, that is.
I mean, I
think we
figure that's
buried
the
the
crux
lead,
of the whole
probably,
issue,
Mark.
right?
Yeah, that is the whole issue. And I know that Tim Donner wrote about this for Liberty Nation and talked about it as just a sop, a last ditch effort to kind of bring along some folks that aren't in support of President Biden. You have to think that for the 8 years of the Obama Biden presidency, and we're now deep into President Biden's term in office. We're, coming up on the halfway mark on year 4 of his presidency. And yet now is when they've finally decided that they're going to do this. And of course, they haven't actually done it, which could have been accomplished in a day. They could have actually just done it. There's just talk about doing it, which is sort of, not even the full measure of what's been done. But yeah, it seems like it is, call me a cynic, Mark, but gee, it just seems like this is not about redirecting policy to accord with the wishes of Americans. And Americans have made their choices very clear on this. It's no small margin that people don't want their neighbors to be thrown into cages for using and consuming marijuana. They do not want it. It may be a political win for Biden. There's a healthy way to think about it too, Mark, which is that's how democracy is supposed to work, which is, even though Joe Biden is an inveterate drug warrior who has an unquenchable thirst for throwing Americans into cages for all manner of things, especially, low-income blacks through his crime bill, that the political process is forcing even the great drug warrior Joe Biden perhaps, to reduce his stridency on the issue.
And if he can swing a few votes for the 2024 election, well, that's all just coincidence again. Scott, we'll be right back with you after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.